Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime for the massive game this weekend. I am, of course, talking about Liverpool against Manchester United at Anfield at 4 o'clock on Sunday in a game which is massive for all the usual reasons, because it's a rivalry match, because it's Liverpool against Manchester United, because you hope it comes with the kind of blood and thunder that this fixture should always bring, but also for another few extra reasons that have been thrown on top for this game in particular. And starting off, I think this is probably one of Liverpool's best opportunities in years to beat Manchester United. I mean, our results, when you look back at maybe the last 10 games or so against Man U, when you look back at the last half decade or so, aren't that great, to be perfectly honest. Since the Moyes era, I'm pretty sure we've only actually beaten them once, and that was in the Europa League tie against them when Jurgen Klopp had just arrived and they were in the death throes of the Louis van Gaal era, where they were just a complete shadow of any team that Manchester United aimed to be. Apart from that, the results against them, and yeah, there've been a hell of a lot of draws in there as well. Certainly since Jose Mourinho arrived on the scene, I'm pretty sure, apart from the one at Old Trafford last season, every single game between Mourinho's United and Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool has ended in a draw. So it's not been entirely doom and gloom, but I think given the sort of state they've been in the past, certainly since Mourinho arrived, they haven't always been amazing. You would have at least expected that Liverpool would have got more than one win in the last 10. And given how fantastic Liverpool are at the moment, and I'll come on to sort of how much we're hitting form at the moment a bit later on in the video, but just how good we are in general and have been for the last 12 months or so, and how bad Manchester United are as we enter, I talked about the death throes of the Louis van Gaal era. I feel like we're coming to that kind of stage with Mourinho's United at the moment. They have really, really started to stall, and even though they weren't that great when he first arrived, and we had that 0-0 draw at Anfield back in, I think, October of 2016, and then the 1-1 draw at Old Trafford in the same season, I think this is certainly the worst they've been under Jose Mourinho, and as a result represents probably, since the Moyes era, I'd say our best opportunity in terms of how good we are and how bad Manchester United are to actually get one over them at last and get 3 points in the Premier League against our old rivals. And as I said just earlier, Liverpool are playing absolutely fantastically at the moment, and I think this is such a great opportunity to show how far we've come, because even when Liverpool have been in good form over the last couple of seasons, even when they've looked like they are as good as, if not even better than Manchester United, they haven't been able to get the result to prove it. The one that really springs to mind is that 0-0 in 2016, where Man United were just sort of getting together under Jose Mourinho. They weren't actually that great, and Liverpool had started to hit a stride under Jurgen Klopp. It was at that point in the season where we were involved in a title challenge, coincidentally as well, and we ended up drawing the game 0-0 despite the fact we dominated pretty much every single stat. And I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to show that not only are we as good as those Jurgen Klopp teams were in the past when they really, really started to hit form, we've become even better now and we're capable of getting a result. And I also feel like Liverpool have been in such great form at the moment. I say I feel like it's not an empirical fact. We've been winning games just constantly, and I think especially in the Napoli game, it felt like we were getting back to the kind of free-flowing attacking football that we saw from Liverpool at their absolute best last season. So first of all, best opportunity in years to beat Manchester United. Second of all, it's such a great opportunity to show how far this Liverpool team has come under Jurgen Klopp. And finally, I think it's so important that we stay ahead of Manchester City at this stage, because we've only just overtaken them. We've only just finally made up that gap that some people thought was going to be impossible to breach over the last few games. We finally made the step up to first in the table, and I think if we drop away instantly, because let's be honest, Everton are not going to do us a favour against Manchester City. I'd love them to. I could be eating my words at 12:30 on Saturday, and to be honest, they would taste delicious. I'd absolutely love for Everton to get a result, but whenever you want them to do you a favour, they always disappoint you. It's what it's been like for Everton fans for years, and it's what it is like occasionally for Liverpool fans when we need Everton to actually get a result. So I can't see them getting a result at the Etihad, which means we're probably going to have to beat Manchester United. And I think if we don't, if we drop points, it really gives us a psychological blow in terms of the title race, because it gives City a boost. in terms of the fact that they feel like that Chelsea loss can now be cast off as a blip and they're back where they belong at the top of the Premier League table. And it also gives us a blow in terms of it's taken so long to overtake City. It's taken so much effort to finally bridge that gap and get to the top of the Premier League table. To then lose that advantage instantly, I feel like would just be absolutely crushing for those Liverpool players who've put in so much effort to make up the gap over the last couple of months or so. And also, you know, it would be silly to suggest that we're going to stay at the top of the table at the end of every match day between now and May. I'm sure at some point City or maybe even someone else will claw their way back in and potentially overtake us at some point. But for the foreseeable future, I think it's important that we just ram this advantage home. If nothing else, just to test Manchester City, just to see what Guardiola's City team, in all its pomp at the moment, is actually like when it has to play catch-up. Because last season, they never had to do that. They were never under pressure to actually get wins. At this stage of the season, there was something like 15 points ahead in first place. So it's just interesting to see what happens with Manchester City now. And I don't think Liverpool can afford to pass up the opportunity to put the pressure on them and see how they cope with having to play catch-up like we've done for the last couple of months. So it's a must-win game for Liverpool this weekend. No matter how much you can say, oh, maybe a draw would be a good result, you know, especially with fixture congestion and it being Mourinho's United, they're tough to break down and everything. This is such a good opportunity to ram home our title advantage, to show how good we are at the moment and to beat a Jose Mourinho Manchester United side. How can you possibly not want Liverpool to take that opportunity this weekend? So team news going into the game, after all that build-up, all that excitement, all that kind of let's get going, I'm going to bring us all down a little bit with some injury news because it's not been great for Liverpool in terms of that news over the last week or so. We've obviously had the Joe Gomez injury that he picked up against Burnley, and there were another few instances in the game against Napoli where defenders were hauled off with injuries that could potentially keep them out of this game. We now know that Joel Matip's collarbone injury that he sustained in the dying seconds of that Napoli game is now going to keep him out for 6 weeks, which is of course a crushing blow with the fixture congestion of the festive period. And on top of that, Trent Alexander-Arnold also went off. We don't really know that much about what it was. I think some people were saying it was a dead leg. Other people were saying it's some sort of foot injury that he's picked up. To be honest, it's impossible to tell whether or not he's going to be available for the United game until Jurgen Klopp makes his press conference tomorrow afternoon, where we will presumably find out so much more. I'm sure that will be the question on every journalist's lips, whether or not Trent Alexander-Arnold will be available. Because, of course, with Joe Gomez already out, it poses a huge question as to what Liverpool do with regards to who they field in that right-back slot in the game against Man United on Sunday. At the moment, I'm working on the assumption that he's not going to be available simply because I think if he was, we might have heard something by now. He might have put out a tweet or an Instagram post saying he's fine, no one needs to worry. We might have seen him in training or something like that. As of now, there's been absolutely no word on it whatsoever, which does kind of suggest that it's up in the air. The club don't want to put out a statement yet saying whether he is or isn't going to be available. But for the purposes of this video and my lineup prediction that will come up in a sec, I'm going to work on the assumption that he is not going to be available for this game. However, one player that did get withdrawn against Napoli but is probably going to be fine is James Milner. He came off but basically because he was goosed, because he was totally knackered and he was suffering with cramp. But the fact we saw him, you know, back out on the pitch doing post-match interviews after the game, walking around freely, suggests that it was just cramp, it was just fatigue. And, you know, ideally that would mean you wouldn't want to play him in the next game simply because you want him to get a little bit of rest ahead of, again, this festive fixture period that is coming up, and it's going to be incredibly hectic. But with the injuries that have been piling up, we are possibly going to have to throw him in anyway. So the starting 11 that I think, provided all things remain equal and the injury news as we have it at the moment remains true, that I think we are going to field against Manchester United. I think in the goal, it's going to be the great big bear of a man that is Alisson Becker. It's so exciting to go into a game like this knowing that whatever happens, we can hopefully rely on the fact that our goalie is the absolute business. He is fantastic. That save against Napoli will only do what I presume is his already soaring confidence the world of good. He will be going into this game on a high. He'll be going into this game up against David De Gea at the other end of the pitch thinking, you know what, I am the best goalkeeper in the world, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, I'd rather Man United didn't get a single shot on goal, but he will possibly get a great chance to prove that in this game, so fingers crossed that he takes it. So Alisson Becker is starting in goal, and instantly, all those fears about the defence, all those fears that, injuries are going to get the better of us and Man United might be able to bypass our defence because all the players who are available to play are a little bit fatigued. Suddenly, the fact that Alisson Becker is in goal just fills you with relief. It fills you with joy. It fills you with a sense of comfort that whatever happens, his big, massive black gloves are going to have a handle on things no matter what happens elsewhere on the pitch. So Alisson Becker, my hero, your hero, everyone's hero, starts in goal. And then the centre-back pairing, I think, there's no question about this here. All things being equal again, if no one gets injured in training, if no one picks up any knocks from the Napoli game that keep them out of this match, it's going to be Dejan Lovren and Virgil van Dijk. Very, very interesting to see how both of them get on, especially Dejan Lovren, because he obviously didn't have that good of a game at Old Trafford last time out when we played Manchester United. And should they use Romelu Lukaku in this game, which I think they probably will, because I'll come on to their injury problems later on, but their squad is looking a bit thin on the ground as well, then they will look to get those aerial duels won and everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see how Dejan Lovren gets on, given that that proved to be a weak point of his last time he played Manchester United. But I think him and Van Dijk are going to be the centre-back pairing. The fullbacks, I think Andrew Robertson absolutely has to start. I think Mourinho will come into the equation a little bit with the upcoming games against Wolves and against Newcastle and, of course, the FA Cup match as well. But for a game like this, you've got to play Andrew Robertson at left back. And then right back, I think it's going to be James Milner. Now, I did toy with the idea of Nathaniel Clyne because we've almost forgotten that he exists, but he is still a pretty decent right back that Liverpool have got on their books. And with Trent probably not going to be able to play, although, as I said, keep an eye on Jurgen Klopp's press conference tomorrow because I could be forced to eat my words. And like I said earlier on the video, I would love to eat my words. They would be delicious if it turns out that Trent Alexander-Arnold is available for this game. But as it stands, he's probably not going to be available. Neither is Joe Gomez. And even though your thoughts automatically go to, well, obviously Nathaniel Clyne should come in, James Milner has already been used to fill in when Trent and Gomez weren't available ahead of Nathaniel Clyne. So I don't know entirely why. I think Jurgen Klopp maybe just doesn't rate Nathaniel Clyne as a footballer and doesn't really see him as a useful cog in his system, and sees James Milner, despite the fact it's not his natural position, as a better player, certainly going forward. And maybe, with the Bournemouth game being a totally different situation to this, where we're probably going to have to do a bit more defending against United than we did against Bournemouth. Although, again, I could eat my words because we all know how Jose Mourinho loves to set up in these kind of games. I think this game is now being referred to as Liverpool's annual 0-0 home draw with Manchester United. So they could be hugely defensive. But if they do attack, then maybe there is a shout for putting in Nathaniel Clyne over James Milner, who is, of course, not playing in his natural position, but does maybe have a little bit more to offer going forward. However, I think because of the way Mourinho might set up for this game, he's probably going to go with James Milner at right back. And also, James Milner is, of course, a capable midfielder as well. So if he does ever get drawn out and needs to participate in the battle in the centre of the pitch, then he is useful as having an extra player that we can bring in should we start to get overrun in that area of the pitch. But moving forward into the actual midfielders, this is where, again, as I always say in videos, it gets interesting because I'm not entirely sure how Liverpool should set up with their midfield for this game. Normally, if you'd asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have said 4-2-3-1 because I would have wanted to get that three behind Mohamed Salah onto the pitch to kind of service them, especially if Man U play a low block defence. I want to get as many attacking creative players on the pitch. But with the emergence of Naby Keita and the fact that we still don't entirely know where he fits into that 4-2-3-1, I think when he's played there, he's sometimes played as a right winger or as a left mid or stuff like that in a sort of half 4-2-3-1, half 4-4-2 kind of formation. I think we might actually switch up our formation ever so slightly to accommodate Naby Keita because, of course, he didn't start against Napoli and he's in really, really good form at the moment after playing against Burnley and Bournemouth, that I think he has to at least play some role in this game. Now, if he doesn't start, I think we go with the 4-2-3-1 and I think we bring in Shaqiri for him. But I think Jurgen Klopp's probably going to want to start Naby Keita in this game. So I think he goes with the midfield three. I think he goes with Gini van Aalden at the base. But I think the way the midfield will be arranged is a little bit different to usual. I think instead of having a number 6 and then 2 number 8s ahead of them, it's probably going to be closer to like having two number 6/8s, if that makes sense, and then a number 10 a bit further forward. I think what we go with is we have Gini Wijnaldum and Fabinho sat a little bit deep. I think Fabinho has to start this game, again, partly because he didn't play against Napoli, and also because Man United are going to play long balls. They are going to try and use Lukaku as an aerial threat. So if Lovren's going to get isolated there, which we don't want to happen, then we need someone who's playing in the midfield to actually step in and help out. And I think Fabinho, with his height, with his strength, with his ability at winning aerial duels, I think out of every single Liverpool player, he wins more aerial duels per 90 minutes in the Premier League this season than any of our other players. So I think we have to get him on the pitch purely for that reason. And I think if we play him and then we play Wijnaldum like they do in that kind of double pivot in the 4-2-3-1, and then we use Keita just a little bit ahead of them, it allows us to kind of play a nice fluid system where it's not quite as good as the 4-2-3-1, which I think I do still prefer, but it gets Keita on the pitch and it gets him in a position where he can be incredibly influential. And then the front three, I think we go with Mohamed Salah on the right wing, Sadio Mane on the left wing, and Roberto Firmino down the middle. Now, obviously, this could change an awful lot, and I think if we do play the 4-2-3-1, then it is Salah down the middle and Firmino as like the number 10 and Shaqiri on the right, Mane on the left. And I'd quite like to see that because personally, in this game, I'd rather see Mohamed Salah down the middle simply because the problem that he had at Old Trafford last season was when he got neutralised essentially because Man United doubled up on him. They had Ashley Young at fullback, who was incredibly physical and, to be honest, actually fouled him a fair few times, and United did get away with one a little bit there. But whenever he finally got the better of Ashley Young, one of their centre-backs would just fly in and stop him dead in his tracks. So I think if Mo Salah plays down the middle, he can actually isolate the centre-back, and I think that works incredibly well for him because even when a centre-back has a good game against him now, they can't have a good game forever. We saw it against Napoli where Kalidou Koulibaly was fantastic for the vast majority of the game, but he got beaten once by Mo Salah, and Salah punished him by scoring the goal that put Liverpool through and dumped Napoli down into the Europa League. So I think if we play Salah down the middle, then he can isolate one of Bailly or Phil Jones or whoever they play at centre-back. And then even if one of those players has an absolute blinder, at some point you'd back Salah being the world-class centre-forward that he is to get the better of them, create a goal-scoring chance, and hopefully get the kind of goals that will win Liverpool this game. So, to be honest, I don't know how Jurgen Klopp is going to set up, and either way, I'm happy with it. If he plays the 4-3-3 to accommodate Keita, that's fine, because I back Keita to have a fantastic game against Manchester United. And also, I think he'd be incredibly useful in terms of unlocking that Man United defence that has been so difficult to break down for Liverpool in the past. If we go with the 4-2-3-1, we've got Salah down the middle, which is great, and also Shaqiri, who I think his balls that he plays over the top of defences would again be fantastic at breaking down Manchester United's stoic defence. So it's testament to how good Liverpool are at the moment that Jurgen Klopp has got multiple options, all of which would be great for breaking down Manchester United. He's not backed into a corner anymore where he thinks he's just got to hope and pray that the 11 he puts out will get the job done. He can now make tweaks during the match as well. I'm sure if we start with a 4-3-3 or if we start with a 4-2-3-1 or even a 4-4-2, it won't stay like that all the way through the game. Whether we're winning, losing or drawing, whatever's happening, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will make tweaks to keep Manchester United on their toes and try everything possible to break down that defence. That is testament to just how good Liverpool are at the moment and also just how useful our squad depth is at this stage in the season. So taking a look at Manchester United then, they are obviously not in the best state at the moment, and I think a lot of that is down to essentially the civil war that's going on in the club at the moment. The simple fact that I don't think Jose Mourinho really wants to be there anymore. I don't think he gets on with the players. I don't think he gets on with the higher-ups at the club. I don't think he really wants to be the Manchester United manager for much longer, and to be honest, I think he's almost trying to get the sack. So that instantly bodes well for this game, and it's what I mean in terms of this being one of our best ever opportunities to beat Manchester United, because the manager isn't working for the players aren't working for the manager, nothing's really coming together for them at the moment, and it's perfectly timed with Liverpool hitting some of the best form and playing the best football that we have seen at decades in this club. However, the big problem for me is that I think even though Mourinho wants to get the sack, I think for games like this, his pride almost gets in the way, because I don't think he can be underestimated in a match like this, because no matter how bad Mourinho is doing, no matter what kind of mess his club is in, when it comes to big games, and especially big games against rivals, he is capable of pulling good performances out the bag, because these are the kind of games that he lives for. These games where he can look at one of the best attacks in Europe and say, challenge accepted, where he can look at a team that has been tearing defences apart and say, you know what, you are not going to get a sniff against my team. He loves setting teams up to stifle fantastic free-flowing attacking footballers, and this game is perfectly set up for him to do just that. So it's an interesting situation, because you almost wonder whether that means he will get the best out of his players, or whether that relationship is so fractured now that it will all simply fall apart and the players will refuse to implement his plan, or vice versa. He doesn't care enough about Manchester United anymore to actually implement that plan in the first place. If you ask me, I think his ego gets the better of him. It's happened already this season in games like the one they played against Chelsea, or potentially the one against Arsenal as well, or even against Spurs, where even though they lost 3-0, they actually played reasonably well in the first half, and even, whisper it quietly, played some quite nice football. Now, I think the blueprint Liverpool have to go for is the one that Manchester City implemented, where even though Manchester United tried to set up defensively, City were just far too good for them, and I'm hoping that's what happens this weekend, where Manchester United, even if they try, even if they pile men behind the ball, they just haven't got it in them anymore. The players haven't got the strength to implement the manager's vision over the full 90 minutes, and inevitably it all falls apart, as it did at the Etihad when they shipped 3 goals. So in terms of their injury news, if we talk about Liverpool having a bit of a crisis, they at the moment aren't doing particularly well either. Now, Mourinho's been a little bit cryptic, and obviously everything he says in press conferences now is always to be taken with a pinch of salt, but he's kind of been a little bit iffy on whether players are injured or not. He's talking about players and saying like they're injured, but they have a chance for Sunday. A lot of those players do play in the defence as well, so I think the way they set up in terms of the game against Valencia is probably quite similar to what they're going to have to do against Liverpool, simply because of the lack of players they have available. I think the centre-back pairing that they are going to have to go with is Eric Bailly and Phil Jones. Already Mohamed Salah is thinking about that and licking his lips at his home on Merseyside, because Phil Jones, awful, you know, always got an error in him. You imagine that if any Liverpool player takes him on one-on-one, they will either sit him down on his backside or get a penalty, or he'll kick it in the net for them anyway, like he did against Valencia. And Eric Bailly is just a shadow of his former self at the moment. Now, there are other players that could be drafting in. Apparently, Chris Smalling has been playing on painkillers for a while now, so while he missed out the game against Valencia, he could be available. But even if Man U switch their defenders round and bring in some players that didn't play against Valencia, that's almost been the problem for them this season and for a while now, is that no one really knows what their best defence is at the moment. And it's one of the problems Mourinho has, and it's what makes it difficult for him to set up for these defensive stoic performances, because no one really knows who's going to play. Some of that's down to injuries. Some of that is just down to the fact that I don't think he knows his best 11, and he certainly doesn't know his best back line. So Liverpool have got to exploit that. They've got to exploit that uncertainty at the back for Manchester United. And also, in terms of uncertainty with their defence, De Gea's form this season has been, in comparison to what it has been for him in the past, pretty naff. Now, I don't want to tempt fate here, because Man United always seem to bring out their best for Liverpool. Mourinho brings out his best for Liverpool. De Gea certainly brings out his best against us. There have been countless games when I've been recounting all those draws against them that we would have won if it wasn't for the fact that they had David De Gea. The one time we actually won, that 2-0 in the Europa League, I still think about it. It should have been 6-0 if it wasn't for just how incredible he was with all the ridiculous saves that he was making in goal. Now, I feel like we can't complain about that now, because Liverpool have got a goalie like that of their own, a goalie who is capable of making stupid saves that they shouldn't even be allowed to make, that rescue points, and the kind of saves that title challenges and trophy attempts are built on. But De Gea hasn't been that good this season, and while he might bring out his best this weekend, I think it's so important that we just test him and we test that back line as well. So I think attacking quickly is going to be really important in this game, because I think even if it doesn't come off, even if the long ball forward is cut out by a defender, if we keep doing it, if we keep piling on the pressure, crucially, if we keep bypassing their midfield, because I think that is how Manchester United will look to stifle us. They will look to have the Nemanja Matic sit back and the Herrera sit back, Marouane Fellaini sit back. Now, I'm sure out of those players that I've mentioned already, at least one of them is injured. I'm not entirely sure about the fitness state of Ander Herrera, but whatever midfielders they field, they will look to get them back quickly to block passes and stuff like that. So we need to make sure we bypass them by playing balls over the top every now and then, by playing balls around the defenders. And like I said, sometimes it won't come off. It will go out for goal kicks. It will go out for throw-ins. It will be cut out by their centre-backs and their goalkeeper. But if you do it enough, given the uncertainty around Manchester United's defence at the moment, I feel like we will get through the back door. That's why players like Shaqiri are going to be important. It's why players like Keita are going to be important. It's why I want to see Fabinho and Wijnaldum playing at the base of midfield as well, because out of all our players, I'd back them the most to be able to get the ball forward quickly and make those transitions count. So all in all, Manchester United are there for the taking on Sunday, and as much as people will say a point is a good result, if I'm Jurgen Klopp, if I'm his backroom staff, if I'm his players, if I'm any Liverpool supporter in the ground on Sunday afternoon, given the state of Man United and given just how good Liverpool are at the moment, I would be accepting nothing other than a win, and potentially a pretty rampant win as well. So fingers crossed for 3 points this weekend. I think Liverpool are going to do it. Let me know how you think it's going to go down in the comments below. Apart from that, thank you guys very, very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, then hit that like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well, especially that post-match one after the game against Napoli. That was absolutely bananas and my favourite video I've ever done. But apart from that, don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter. Don't forget to also stick around for the post-match reaction after the game against Man U on Sunday. Until then, bye for now.